All right. Good Monday morning, everyone. I am back from my trophy wife duties in my office. I'm at home. It's a wonderful feeling to be at home. Absolutely love it. But you guys know me, Amy, here with Russell, and the lovely Sandy is joining us today for Author Talk. And our guest today is Richard. So, you guys, hey, how was everybody's weekend? Mine was adventurous. So I found out this weekend that my children who have no symptoms but a runny nose actually tested positive for COVID. Me and Josh have not. And let me tell you, I have done 2 of the different COVID tests that they have here. One is far more complicated than the other. I actually had to read the directions on how to do it. Very complicated. But I had to literally body tackle my toddlers to test them, and I don't recommend that at all because they didn't talk to me for a little bit. But they're
That can
doing
be
fine.
good.
I know they're doing fine. They don't have any symptoms other than a runny nose. They are running around acting like their normal buffoon selves. So that was my adventurous weekend. Found out Saturday, and now besides my office, I'm wearing a mask in my own house, and I feel silly doing that, but I don't have time to get COVID this week. So any other week, yes, but not this week. So that is my weekend in a nutshell. James, yours was uneventful, man. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, James, but hey, good morning to you. So Russell, Sandy, Richard, what did you guys do this weekend?
Mine was pretty uneventful too, actually. Went to the gym on Saturday. Just nothing, and I had no company. That was a good thing.
Oh, nice. Well, I saw you and Raul on Friday. You guys took a
On
trip up
Friday,
here.
now Friday we had a
Yes,
great time. We drove up to
I
College
know.
Station. That
It
was a
was so
great
much
day.
fun. You guys took the trip up here to Aggie Land, as
It's
most would
a
call
terrible
it.
thing. It's a terrible thing.
It's a thing, okay? It's just a thing. But you guys came. We had a lovely brunch and talk. Raul's book is getting ready to come out, so we were talking about his book and just congratulating him and everything like that. Oh, Russell, you're gonna love this because I know how much you're an Aggie fan. Josh actually got to go to his first Aggie game on Saturday against the Miami Hurricanes.
First, you let
No,
him ride
I
motorcycles.
know. I
Then you let
know.
him go to an Aggie game. You're trying to get rid of this husband.
Oh my gosh. He still has one motorcycle, okay? I took him down from 2 to 1, Richard. It became a whole thing, okay?
Yeah, Richard, she totally emasculated this guy.
I
She
did
made
not.
him sell his motorcycle so she could buy an SUV.
Okay, wait. That is not
It's
why
like
he
the
sold
circle of
it.
life, absolutely.
That's not why he sold it. Russell has his own take and spin on things. We just let him roll with it. That's just how this goes. But no, Russell, you would love this. I did give him help. So the game was a late game. It started at 8. He didn't come home till almost 1, right? But he had the audacity, you guys, to come in my house with an A&M cup. And he uses it. He uses it. I told him to take it to work because it's not welcome in my house. Okay. I'm not. But Russell, okay, who is the sports person in this household, not Josh. I watched the UTSA game because Richard, I went to UTSA. They were playing, which is a branch of UT. They were playing the UT Longhorns. So I did watch that game, and that was a very good game. UTSA has come a long way. When I graduated, the football team was uneventful. Now it's, a big powerhouse, and they're doing wonderful things. So I did watch that, and it was a lot of fun when I put my kids down at like 7:30.
Well, I actually am now a UT person. Our household is because my grandson is a student now. He just started. He's a freshman. He
Yay!
just started. Yeah, so we're excited. And the challenge in this house, since I'm from Alabama, and it was the Alabama UT game not this
Oh
What do we
weekend.
now?
my
We have Go
goodness.
Aggies come on our screen.
Roll Tide! Roll Tide!
What'd you
Yes,
do this weekend,
Russell.
Richard?
This weekend, I just released the 14th book in my Soulforge universe. So Windwalker came out on Friday, and then I attended a Royal Medieval Fair, which is fairly local, so we didn't have to travel too far. And we sold lots of books and met a lot of new people and watched a bit of sword fighting going on. So it was a very good weekend.
Nice.
That
I love
sounds
that
like a fun
stuff.
weekend.
Hey, James. James is on. Greg, James says Roll Tide. Hey, Greg, how are you? How's your adventure going?
Are you
Russell,
back
he
home,
has to
Greg?
be
Is he
nice.
back in Houston?
I have
No,
to
he
be
had a
nice to
road trip,
Amy.
but Yeah,
I know.
he just says to be nice to me, but then he kind of downfalls when he says "Go Aggies." So
That
it's
might
kind of
not
one
be
of
the
those.
same. That might not be the same Facebook user because that person stopped putting their name in.
No, I'm looking on my screen. That's how I knew
Oh,
who
you can
he
see who it is.
was.
Okay.
I know he's just doing it because he knows I live in
Oh,
Aggieville.
he's
Yep,
Greg
nope.
is still in
Oh,
Augusta,
he's in
Georgia.
Augusta, Georgia. Russell, Greg, say hi to Russell. He lives in Georgia.
Come on by. We'll have a cigar.
Come on by. Okay, so full disclaimer: both of my kids are at home. So Richard, you're going to hear my kids in the background. I'm so sorry. That's just how life rolls. It is a live show, you guys, and we just roll
And
with
I
it.
think
So
that's
we
one
never
of
know.
the great things about this show is sometimes we hear Amy's kids. Sometimes Russell gets frozen because he's in Georgia. So, but, but it's just a fun, experience, and it's just us being real, and then finding out who is Richard H. Stevens, and so that's what we're going to do this morning. I can't wait. So fun! It's fun and games.
I do have a complaint before we get going, though.
Of course you do.
Sandy said she didn't know the difference between science fiction and fantasy. I almost popped my head off.
Okay,
that.
Russell, but if you had just paid attention to the end of the rest of the sentence, it was, I didn't know the difference until I started reading and working with you guys and then hearing about fantasy and realizing that there is a distinct difference between the two. But as a reader who my first choice of book is not science fiction or fantasy, it's mysteries. So, so how would I know that unless started hanging out with all these geeks? Hi, James Hill. It's great to see you too. James, are you still staying with me in October? Sorry,
Let's leave that till afterwards. We
I
don't
know.
need
I'm
to know
just
about
kidding.
that. So, Richard, what is this book launch you did this weekend? And interesting, I've never heard an author before say what you said, but I know there's logic behind it that you don't do book launches. What's your strategy about that?
I don't know if I actually have a strategy. Like being an independent author, there's so many different hats that you don't want to wear. I want to write the books. I don't mind editing the books. I don't like doing anything else. So, marketing is certainly not one of my strengths. And so I've put a lot of effort into book launches before, and I've got like up to 40 pre-orders, which isn't a big deal to some of the bigger authors. But it just seems like a lot of time and investment put into such little gains. So I don't bother with it now. I've got a dedicated fan base, and it's slowly building as I do these events, like I did on the weekend. And so I don't put much stock into book launches. So I'm not like a traditionally published author where they have to wait for a year and a half after they finish the book before it actually gets published because there's so much hype that goes into it. As soon as my book is professionally edited, but as soon as it's done, back in my hands, and as soon as I do the final touches, right away it's off to my printer. And as soon as I know I'm getting it back from my printer, I put it up on Amazon, and that's my launch date. So I can't be bothered. I don't know, maybe I'm lazy, but I just don't put much stock into a book launch.
Well, as an independent author, you are a business owner, and so you do have to look at losses, gains, margins, all of that. So, but my thought would be, as a marketing person, that maybe instead of just not doing them, that you redo the way you do them or something. And I know Amy is just like the world's foremost expert in book launches. So I would suggest you talk to her because I know, and actually Russell's first book, we had a great book launch. And so that's just been our specialty is book launches. So maybe you want to tweak the way you're doing it, or, if what you're doing is working, then I'm always like, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's working. It's just that I don't know really what I'm doing on that end, and you put as much research in as you want. I've paid people to do things for me, and it seems like my return on investment is not too good. So at some point you just say the heck with it, and you just start launching them. So after 14 books, I just want to get the next book out, and like I say, I've got a dedicated fan base. They love my stuff, and I want to get the book out to them. Windwalker is such a beast. It was supposed to be out in April this year, and it just the process just kept slowing down, and it finally released last Friday. So
do you do
Nice.
any social media or anything like that?
oh yeah, we're on. I'm older, which doesn't mean that I can't do TikTok, but it's just something I like to do. I don't really get Instagram or Twitter. Obviously, I'm on it. My wife looks after a lot of that stuff for me because she's more technically savvy than I am. I enjoy doing it on Facebook just because you can actually interact with people. You can actually talk to people through Messenger. Whereas I just find that TikTok and all that other stuff, you really can't have conversations with people per se unless they put a little comment somewhere that you have to try and find. And so
Yeah.
maybe I'm just old school and I don't understand the platforms, but
So
No.
how do you let your followers, you said you have this fan base,
yep.
and how do you let them know that you have a new book? Like, how did you let them know that Windwalker just came out this weekend?
So I have an author page on Facebook, and so I've got my fans are on there, and I have a regular personal page on Facebook. I do most of my stuff through Facebook. I also have a newsletter, so I release a newsletter, let them know what's coming out in 2 weeks, and then when it actually comes out, I just remind them that it's out.
I love it. So I know that we're talking about your series that you have, and beforehand we kind of were getting to know each other, and you said that there is a potential to be 4 books or more. So tell us a little bit about this series and the book that you just launched on Friday. Tell us a little bit about it, because I know Russell started this whole conversation because Sandy didn't necessarily know the difference between sci-fi and fantasy, and so I know that you have a fantasy series. So let's dive a little bit into that. What is it about?
Yeah, so my fantasy series that it's called the Soulforge Universe. It takes place over 2,000 years. It's about the rise and fall of the dragons. But Terry Brooks was my inspiration back in 1980. I read The Sword of Shannara, so I'm probably a bit older than you, Amy. But when I read that, I fell in love with reading fantasy. I was reading science fiction before that. I loved Star Wars when it came out in '77. But so back in 1982, I started the first book called Soulforge, and there was never supposed to be a dragon in my books. And for the next 35 years, I wrote Soulforge every now and then. I had 5 kids and 2 careers, so my kids always came first, with compared to what I'm going to do. And back then, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Amazon, we had nothing like that. And being a Canadian in a small city in Canada, like the chances of me realistically getting published and picked up by a big publisher weren't great. So I just did it as a hobby. And then, with the advent of the internet and Amazon, all of a sudden I realized, hey, I can maybe publish these. So I pitched an agent in Nashville in 2017, and I worked with an agent for a while. And my experience was not good with an agent. They're just, maybe I should give them more of a chance, but they were just so difficult to talk to. Like if they want to get back to you, they will. If they don't, they just leave you hanging. So Finally, I just said, I'm going to do it myself. And I found myself a professional editor in Glasgow, Scotland, and a professional cover designer in Italy, and away we went. So the Soulforge universe was born. And when a dragon came into my book in 2019, which was never supposed to happen, it opened up my whole universe. And I want to explain to the readers of my first 2.5 books why there's no mention of a beast the size of a house that breathes fire. So I went back 500 years and wrote the Legends of the Lurker series. And it's Rika's story about her trying to save the dragons from the king. And then when I was writing that series, I mentioned a 700-year-old elf queen. And I thought, oh, I want to write her story. So I was going to stop right there, right through halfway through that series and start writing The Rise of the Elf Queen. And I thought this, and if you're a George R. R. Martin fan, I apologize. I love George R. R. Martin stuff too, but I did not want a George R. R. Martin, our fans, or my fans. Like that almost seems like George R. R. Martin is now a verb. I didn't want a George R. R. Martin, my fans. So I actually finished that series. I went back in time now, and that's what I'm writing. And so Keeper the Jewel was born, and this is about the rise of the Elf Queen. But
nice. Well, Fern loves dragons, especially purple dragons. So I know that she's kicking herself in the foot that she couldn't be here because she absolutely just loves dragons. But how did the whole series and idea come to you? Was it just something that you've always wanted to write about and it just kind of evolved? Or was it just an idea that hit you and you're like, man, this would make a great series. I'm going to sit down and just knock it out?
My original series, I never thought about writing fantasy, even though I liked reading it. Like I said, I just dabbled in writing it. It wasn't a big deal for me. I was 17 years old. I was sitting at home. I was expecting a child. So I dropped out of school in grade 10 and to support that child. And I had my headphones on. I was listening to this little local rock station, and the song Run to the Hills from Iron Maiden came on the radio one night. And for some reason, it inspired that Soulforge saga in my head. I knew the beginning, and I knew the ending, and I knew it was going to be a trilogy, and I just had to get there. So I had no idea why Run to the Hills inspired that song, because it's not even a fantasy song per se,
Right.
but that's how everything started. It was never spoke, like I didn't put any thought into it. It just bang, there it was, and everything's come because of that.
Yeah. No, that is a great song. Yes.
It is an amazing song. It's my favorite song from Iron Maiden. Absolutely.
Is it?
So,
Wow.
Richard,
Oh my
before
God.
we get too far into talking to you, I want to talk to you about your story, your background story, because that's where that's what differentiates, I think, every author, is that everybody has a unique story. And I've not ever heard one like yours. And I think that's amazing. So tell us a little bit about, you said you dropped out of school at 17 to take care of your family, which is, of course, very admirable. And then at the age of 36, you went back to high school, graduated, and became a policeman. So tell us that story in your words.
Oh, it's kind of ironic, because before my son coming along probably saved me from being on the other side of the bars, because I was doing things that I shouldn't have been, and maybe a little bit illegal before then. But when all of a sudden I knew I was going to have a child, I just straightened me right up, and I dropped out of school, got a job right away, and that probably saved me from being on the other side of the bars. And then for the next 22 years, I worked in a warehouse. I drove a forklift. I was a shipper, and as much as that put bread on my table and paid my bills, it just wasn't as fulfilling as I thought life would be. And I went back to school to finish my grade, to get my GED. That's what it's called up here in Canada, to finish my high school diploma. And I was going to school with these people who were fast tracking. So everyone else I was going to school with were like 18 and 19. I was 35 and 36, and they're all looking at me like, who's grandpa here? But and that 35, 36 now seems very young to me. But so I went back to school, and when I was working, I thought I'd be a tool and die maker, because I'm very good at math, and I always averaged 99 or higher in mathematic exams and everything else. And I just couldn't land a job in a tool and die maker. And then some fellow I worked with on the shipping floor, he got a job as a special constable. And a special constable is a little bit different than a regular constable up here in Canada. It's more like a bailiff. So my problem is I have a detached retina in my right eye, so I couldn't be a full-blown police officer, because I couldn't meet their criteria to be a police officer on the road. But I could meet the criteria to be a police special constable, which just means we don't carry guns. And the reason we don't carry guns is we work hand in hand with the hardened criminals. And if we were in the cell block and someone got a hold of our gun, of course, it'd be quite a mess. So I applied, and I got the job as a special constable, and I worked with the Wildwood Regional Police Service in the court systems for 12 years. But I'm not a big strapping guy. I'm not an alpha male. So I had a hard time. I like dealing with the youth when they came in to see if I could make a difference with the youth. But the hardened criminals, they just wore on me, and it became a stressful job. And I couldn't think of anything else when I come home that day, as all I could think of is what I'm going to do tomorrow. Who am I going to face tomorrow? I knew the roster that was coming in from the prisons, and these are not nice people, male and female. It just, the stress was going to kill me. And then my wife decided that, we got to get you out of there. So she started up her own online business, and we both left our corporate world jobs on the same day, her to save me before I died early, and me to follow my dreams. So she's been amazing. She's allowed me to do this. And my goal now is to get my book career to the point that I can allow her to retire.
Wow. See, I knew that was a great story, and we were just getting this, skimming over it in your author page. So that's awesome. And now the other story that I read about you that was really fascinating was how you got started as a writer.
How I got started as a writer? Like I say, I'm older than most that are probably even viewing this. So back in the 70s, when we had summer vacation, we went outside and we played outside all day. We picked up a stick and a rock, and that made us happy. But summer vacation it gets long and boring as a kid, because you don't know what to do with yourself after a while. But it was like an early August day, and we're sitting around bored, me and my best friend, and I had a Hardy Boys book beside me. I was 9 years old, and I'm thinking, I could probably write something like that, because I loved reading the Hardy Boys. So I sat down. Paul and I both sat down to start writing our own Hardy Boys books. I was Richard, and he was my brother Paul, and we changed our names to Stobitz, Stevens and Corbett. And so I started writing, and so I wrote my own Hardy Boys book from my point of view. And then in '77, I got to see Star Wars at the theaters when it came out. What a mind expanding thing to see back then. It was just like there was nothing like that out there at that point. And I just fell in love with science fiction, and I started reading science fiction, and I wrote a 600-page science fiction book, which will never see the light of day, but it was all about me and my buddies going around saving the galaxy. And in my homeroom teacher, he was the Darth Vader type person. So it was a lot of fun writing it. And then like I say, when I read Terry Brooks in 1980, I just fell in love with fantasy. Sword of Snarl will always be my favorite book. It's almost like when you see Star Wars: A New Hope, even though it might not be the best show of the Star Wars Galaxy franchise, it's the one that I saw first. So it's the one that's special to me. So the Sword of Shannara is my introduction into fantasy, and I absolutely fell in love with fantasy, like the mystery and the worlds and everything else that Terry Brooks put into the Sword of Shannara was just amazing, and I was hooked on fantasy at that point.
Well, another great story is the life and times of Richard H. Stevens. So that was great. That was awesome. So now tell us about this book that just came out this weekend.
So
Windwalker. And where is it in the series? How many are in this series now?
So there's 14 in my universe. So like Terry Brooks, everyone was familiar with Terry Brooks. Mine are a little bit different than Terry Goodkind, because Terry Goodkind, his story just kept on going, and you finally got to the end. Terry Brooks writes his in trilogies, even though they're in the same universe, and there is a loose chronological thread that does tie all the stories together. You can pick up any of Terry's trilogies, never have to read anything before or after, and you'll absolutely enjoy the story. It's like going to see a movie. You go into book 1, you leave the theater book 3, and you're happy you watched a movie. So mine are the same. I keep going back in time. So it's, again, I come back to Star Wars. Star Wars came out in '77, and then the next 2 movies came out by the '80s. And everyone loved Darth Vader, and they want to know, how did Darth Vader come to be Darth Vader? So they went back in time and they released The Phantom Menace. And, I'm not a big Jar Jar Binks fan, but I love that trilogy as well. And I'm doing the same thing. So when that dragon came into my story, I wanted to go back in time. And so I write all my books series in trilogies for the most part. This one's going to be a 4-book series just because the storyline of this Rise of the Elf Queen is so expansive. I can't do it in 3 books, but I generally, all my stories are in trilogies. So when I do book signings, I point out all the different trilogies on the table and tell my readers that you can pick up anything you want on this table. Never have to read anything before or after. You're going to enjoy the story. But if you like my stuff, you can read forward in time. You can go back in time and start chronologically at book 1 and come forward with me. It depends on how you want to read it. Some people like to read the publishing order, and some people like to read chronological order. So everyone's different.
That's great. So that answers most of the questions I had been looking at. So Russell, did you have some things you wanted to discuss with Richard when we were on the air?
I do. Number 1 is on your webpage, you have a flying, breathing dragon.
Yes.
Where did you find that to put on a webpage?
That is a neat story, because we had a web page because, we're independent, so we don't have a lot of money to do these things. And we did it through one, we did it on our own, and it was nice, but we wanted to get professional. We want to try to up our author game last year. So we spent $2,500 or something like that on a professional web designer. He revamped our website, and it was okay, but it was so hard to use and so hard to manage, and especially the back end. So when the new book came out, my wife looks after these things, and it was so hard for her to actually do whatever you have to do. I don't know anything about web design, but she, to alter the web page. And so we decided that this isn't working for us, because then we have to keep paying this fellow to keep changing things for us. So she took that professional site down and decided that she's going to give it another crack. And this is my wife's doing. My wife did all this. I do have no idea. I can't answer the question how she got that thing on there, but I think she does a great job.
Well, that's interesting. You weren't happy with your original webpage. You hired someone to do a professional one, and it was too complicated to add to. Was it too complicated for your readers to find your books on it? Because I've noticed that's one thing about web pages I've noticed is they get so detailed that sometimes you can't find your way around them.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, my wife looks after all that stuff, so she would be the one to ask about anything to do with my websites. She looks after all that stuff in the background. I don't know how she keeps up doing her job and looking after mine. We also have a special needs daughter, and she liked to see me write, so she wanted to write her own series. So my wife said, "Well, you write the story," and my wife actually does all the graphic design for the books, for children's books, and then we edit it together and we publish her books as well. So how she managed to find the time to do any of this stuff, I have no idea. But sorry, Russell, I can't answer that question really.
Well,
And me,
that's actually.
I don't see
Sorry.
hers done in Wix or anything like that. So that it is a great website, a great website.
Oh, thank you. I'll let her know that.
So my next question is, you're talking. You have 14 books out. How long does it take you to start from? How long does it take you to write a book?
It depends on the size of the book. So Windwalker is 659 pages of text, and then there's forward and back matter. I tried to minimize that so I don't have to pay for the print cost. So it's actually came in at 673 pages when I sent it to the printer a couple weeks ago. I can write that. I started that last November, and I thought I would honestly have it done and printed by April. And then, things in life come up, and I kept promising my fans it's going to be out in April. And then I told them it was going to be in June, and then I told them it was going to be in July. And then I was a guest author at Fan Expo, which is our Canada's equivalent to Dragon Con, I would guess. Like, it's the biggest event that we have here
in Atlanta.
But it pales in comparison to anything you guys do down south of the border. But it's the biggest event up here. We had like 125,000 people one day. It was just crazy. But I wanted to have
nice event.
I wanted to have that book out there for that event, and I didn't want to rush the editing though. So when I get the edits back from editor, I always do the final edit, and there was no way I was going to rush the editing, so it wasn't out until
Do you think 600 pages runs off any readers? That's a lot of pages.
Yeah, fantasy, I think depends on what kind of fantasy you like to read. If you like to read epic fantasy, I think that's just standard. Like Brandon's, this thing is probably a novella compared to Brandon Sanderson's stuff. His stuff is so huge. Tad Williams, they're just massive books. And I don't set out to write a massive book. I set out to write a story. I've got some books that are 125 pages. I've got some books that are 200 pages. Most of my books generally fall between 340 to 400 pages. But people always ask me, what page count do you set? And I do not set a page count, because you're either going to be adding stuff to hit that page count, in which case the reader doesn't want to read that fluff anyway, or you're going to be cutting out important things to bring it down to that page count, in which case your story is suffering. So I just write the story, and when the story is done, it's done.
Nice. Do you have like a set form? There's like pantsers and plotters, right? Do you just get on there and it just flows off onto the page, or is it more like you map out everything? Because I imagine in fantasy, right, because you're world building and you have all these backstories, right? And that's what your other books are about, is kind of going back in time and explaining those stories. So how do you keep up with that when you're writing your new books and things like that? What is your way of handling all that?
So when I started Soul Forge in 1982, I did no world building. And I know a lot of people spend years and years into world building, and that's what works for you. That's great. I'm too impatient. I don't have, I'm too lazy again. And that's a bad way to say it, but I don't have time to do that. So when I started Soul Forge, I knew where the main character lived. He lived in this little dilapidated hut in the center of this woods, and I knew where he had to get to. So I opened up the front door. I kicked him in the backside, and I watched him walk across his overgrown yard, and he opened the gate to his creaky gate to this picket fence that was falling over, and he entered the woods. And as we entered the woods, I describe it. I don't go into paragraph and paragraph talking about trees, but as some fantasy writers can do, I advanced the story. And when he turned right to go north up Red Fire Path, that was my world. That's the only thing I had. And then he entered the grasslands. And then when he was in the grasslands, he could see this mountain range in the distance, and he had to go across that. And I started discovering my world through his eyes. At some point, I went ahead and did it with pencil crayons. This is like way back then. We didn't have computers, nothing. But I drew a pencil crayon map, and that map is actually behind me now. Obviously, that's not pencil crayon. I've had it blown up.
Nice.
Everything else, yeah. So that is the original map from my original world, and so I discovered it through his eyes for the most part. At some point, I realized that if he's traveling from Nordic Wood to Grishin, I need to know how long it took them to get there, and I need to know how long it take anyone to. So if I do this 13 books later, someone's doing that same path, they have to travel at the same amount of time. So then I drew the map, so I knew my distances and stuff, like how long does it take a dragon to fly, how long does it take a ship to go. So at that point, I started putting some background information on the Excel spreadsheets, which are great. So every time a character comes into my books, so Amy came in my books and I said she has long blonde hair. I might forget the fact that I said you have brown eyes. I don't know if you have brown eyes or not. It's hard to see on the screen here.
I do, yeah.
So 3 books later, if you're a minor character, I might say, Amy's green eyes looked at me, and my readers, they're so smart. Like, they'll call you out on this. Say, wait a minute, you said 13 books ago that Amy had brown eyes. How come she got green eyes now? So I do an Excel spreadsheet. So every time I build a character, so Russell, I have say he's got his beard, and every time Russell comes into my story, I will pull him up. And I know all these things about him. And it doesn't mean I'm going to mention Russell's beard every time he comes in there, because I would bore the reader to death. But every now and then you just say something about Russell's appearance just to tweak the memory of the reader. So I'm basically a pantser, but I've become not really a plotter, but someone who stores all this stuff in Excel spreadsheets. Excel spreadsheets are amazing, and it's just so easy. I can click on the Amy tab, and I know everything about Amy. Click on Russell tab, yeah, and so that way I don't make mistakes, because it's, as a writer, it takes you a while to write a book, especially my first book is 35 years. You forget all these the minutia of the story. Your reader will not, because they can read it in a day or two, and they know your book better than you do. I can guarantee you that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So you almost have like a family tree kind of Excel spreadsheet in a sense, which I think is smart. See, yet again, this is where we said, I can promote a book. I can help you in all aspects of it. But writing a book, I'm not that organized. I like the saying, like a cluttered desk, I don't know, is like a clear mind. Or when my desk is clean, like organized, I can't find anything. When it's chaotic, I know where everything's at. So I know that I couldn't be a writer because it would be all over the place. You know what I'm saying? So I think like the Excel spreadsheet is amazing. And I only hear like that kind of organization and things like that from fantasy authors that are world building, or have, if they have portals that go to different worlds, because they're trying to keep it all together and keep it all straight. And so I can imagine how overwhelming that would get. And so you said your first book took you 35 years to write. Was it just 35 years to complete, in that time span? And when you actually dedicated time to getting it done, did it just take like a couple years to complete, or was it just all over that lifespan of 35 years?
Yeah, no, every now and then, like I say, I have 5 kids and 2 careers. So like my kids are always more important than anything that I wanted to do, because they didn't ask to be brought in the world, but it was up to me to look after them. And I enjoyed doing stuff with them. So I enjoyed my family time, and my writing just kind of got put on the shelf. And people ask me if I could do anything different if I did this all again. And yes, I would probably make time for myself, make an hour a day or something, just to actually concentrate on my writing. And maybe I would have got the books out earlier, but I know I'm sidetracking here. People talk about writer's block, and I keep telling them, I said, I don't believe in writer's block. I think as soon as you say you have writer's block, you've put additional pressure on you. I was telling them the story will write itself when it's ready to write itself. And if it doesn't write itself today, then don't worry about it. Go have a shower, go have a walk, do whatever. The story will write itself when it's ready to write itself. So this book took 35 years. That was the time frame that it needed to tell itself. And now that I do this full time, I can get out and sorry, Russell, this is something you asked earlier. I can do three of my smaller trilogies, 300 to 400 pages, 3 books a year. But my bigger books, they're getting up to 700 pages. I can generally get almost 2 out a year. The answer to that question from about 10, 15 minutes ago. But I keep getting sidetracked when I talk about this stuff. But yeah.
Nice.
Well, how much time do you spend a day writing?
I get up in the morning and I'm in front of my computer at 8. I look after social media stuff. If I wrote 20, I'm not a prolific writer. I don't write more than 2,500 words. 3,000 words a day is an amazing day for me. I think I've hit 5,000 words a couple times. I'm slow hunt and peck typer. I'm not great at doing that, but that's just the way it is. And I've tried to, I can't dictate. There's no way that's happening. But so I'll do, if I wrote 2,500 words yesterday, I will get up and edit 2,500 words today. So I always edit every day. I'll edit what I wrote yesterday, and it puts me in the frame of mind to get forward. It puts me right into the scene that I just finished and what's led up to that. So now, I'm emotionally invested in the scene again, and away I go.
Nice.
You know what I think is wonderful about that, what you and Russell are talking about, is you have your way, your style, your way, what works. You have what works for you.
Mhm.
And the beautiful thing about being an author is what works for you is the best thing for you to do, the best way, the best method. Like you said, you could not do the speaking it into and then having it transcribed. And a lot of people that works for it. It works better
Mhm.
for me when I can talk easier than I can stop and type. So I love that. And Russell, I love that the way you've done things. I mean, I just think it's brilliant. And I think that's great for other upcoming authors that are new authors to hear that. It's not like you said, you don't believe in writer's block. So just wait, let the story flow, or however you described it. So I think that was a great discussion, and I loved it. And while I'm talking, Richard, if someone hearing this interview wants to interview you, how do they get in touch with you?
They can just email me at Richard H. Stevens, that's PH. Well, you can see it on the screen there. And then the number 1, because I think when I originally started doing stuff, it was through some other email server or whatever, but
Yeah.
I had to use Richard H. Stevens, so I could never use it again. So it's Richard H. Stevens 1 with the number 1 right after Stevens. So it's Richard H. Stevens 1 at gmail.com. And just email me, and I'd absolutely love to do an interview. I offer
And then
myself to do book
you
clubs and
said
stuff.
you have your own show, right? You have your
That's
own.
right.
Is it a podcast?
It's a live video cast just like this one here. So it's on StreamYard, and we entertain. It's exactly like this. And we have I have 2 co-hosts. So there's generally 3 of us on. It's almost identical to what you guys are doing here.
Wow.
Nice.
And that works out great because, life gets busy and sometimes some of the co-hosts can't make it. So there's generally always at least 2 of us there. But we're good enough at it now that if we have to do it on our own, we can. That can sometimes be trying if you're not quite into the writer's genre. It's hard to come up with good questions for them. But
Right. Yeah.
and then we do
definitely.
live reads the first Tuesday of every month. So we'll invite a couple authors in, and we'll get their excerpts from their stories, and we'll read the stories with them. So they're generally the narrator, but they can do what they want because it's their story. And then we dress up. And if you're familiar with Carol Burnett, Amy, you might not be, but Russell and Sandy, you probably remember the old Carol Burnett show. So I feel like I'm Tim Conway, and my David Kelly. He's a science fiction author from Canada. He's like Harvey Korman, and we try to make each other laugh all the time while we're actually doing these excerpts, and we put out these outlandish outfits. I have a goatee, and I put that on just because I think it makes me look more medievalish when I wear my knight's costume at the medieval fair when I'm signing books. An hour before 2 weeks ago, or show 2 weeks ago, I realized that I'd been typecast in 2 of the 3 stories that we're reading as a woman. Oh, God. I was so busy, I never had time to actually look at the script until an hour before the show. So I quick went in the bathroom, shaved off my mustache and goatee, and my wife came in. She put makeup on me, and I put a wig on and a hat on. And so when I came on screen, it just totally threw my co-host because they had no idea what was going on.
I love it. Your wife is like your biggest support system.
Oh, she is.
And I love that because I always, in my mind, right? Because like I'm a big supporter, and like my husband's like, I told you, I had to pull my trophy wife duties last week. But I think it's, one of those that it helps like motivate and push an author to be successful when their spouse is so supportive, because it's finding time to write and do all those things. And so I love like sitting here and listening to like how supportive your wife is, and the website that she did, which is beautiful, and then she put makeup on you for your show. Like I love hearing all of those things because it really does make a difference, like the support system that you have.
Oh, absolutely. I could do without her.
It also helps that your wife can do websites, and that she started her own online business, so you could not work. I mean,
I love that.
That's a supportive wife. So you better hang on to her.
I keep trying. I try to tell her how much I appreciate her all the time, but
I know you do.
She realizes how much I do.
No, I love it. And look, coming from a millennial, I have a love-hate relationship with voice texting. Okay, when I was texting my daughter's teacher that she had COVID and all of this, it came out as if I was drunk, and I didn't have time to reread it. And so I had to send an email, or not an email, but a text message, actually type it and be like, look, I have a love-hate relationship with voice over text. I promise I'm sober, And she just laughed at me, and she was like, it's fine. So dictating in terms of speaking and stuff, I am very animated, so it just doesn't play in my favor ever. So I totally understand that. And that's coming from a millennial. I totally understand that. But what is next for you, Richard? How many more books do you want to put out? What is your goal? What's next?
So like I say, this series is actually going to be a 4-book series because the Rise of the Elf Queen is so expansive. So next book will be out next year. It's called When Legends Arise, and that'll be book 4 in the Highcliff Guardians Series. And then I had a trip funded by the Waterloo Arts Fund to research witchcraft and superstition of the 15th and 16th century in the British Isles. And it was set for May 4th, 2020. And of course, that didn't happen. And we haven't been able to arrange the trip since. So it'll be the actual starting series in my whole universe. So there'll never be anything before that.
Oh, nice.
And
okay.
There's a big dragon called Grimclaw. That he's like one of the main dragons, and it's the rise of Grimclaw. And but it's going to start over in the British Isles. We're going to go see King Arthur's castle down in Tintagel, and we're going to see Merlin's cave. You actually had to book times to get into the cave when the tide was out, because you can't get in when the tide's in. And then we're going to see Stonehenge again. Obviously, I've seen Stonehenge before, but I never researched it. We just went and saw it. It was kind of cool. And there's so many different standing stone sites all around the British Isles, like up in the Orkney Islands, north of Scotland. Well, it's part of Scotland, but in the north of Scotland and in the Isle of Skye, there's so many cool things over there that we want to research to do this original series. But that won't happen until we actually get over there. So every time I write a book, I get 2 more in my head. There's at least 20 more books to come into the Soulforge universe.
Nice.
The nice thing about the Soulforge universe is my original series that I wrote, like I started that in 1982. That is the end series in the universe. So everything feeds into that. So if something happened to me tomorrow, my fans aren't going to say, oh, geez, he never got to finish the series. The finished series is done. I just have to start filling the gaps in now. So.
Oh, nice. I think that's the smart way to do it. You have like that's done, and now we're going to do all the backstories.
I didn't do it intentionally. It just happened that way.
Oh, see, I love it. And I tell you, every person that we have on here is a world traveler. I only left Texas for 3 days, and that's it. But I consider Texas its own country because it's massive, you know? And so I am just envious of all these world travelers. Even Russell travels I take it back. I went to the Dominican Republic with Sandy, and that's as adventurous as I got.
The Caribbean is not traveling.
Yes, it is. You have to have a passport.
You know what? I think, to be fair, though, I don't think any one of y'all want to travel with me. Sandy took the plunge and put on a plane with me. I am not a good flyer. Like, if there's turbulence, I am not the person on a plane, because I will be like, oh my gosh, nope, we're going. Like, I'm not someone you want to have on. So that's also why I haven't traveled.
I held her hand the whole way.
She did. I'm sorry. I'm just not a good flyer. Like, even the 45-minute flight, from San Antonio to Houston is traumatic for me. So I'm jealous, is what I'm trying to say, that you're going to go and do all this and research it. And I'm going to live vicariously through you and all your photos. Because that is amazing. My husband's still trying to, at some point, get me to go to India, which I would love to do, and go see the temples and everything.
You have to go to India.
But I know I have to at some point. But I'm not a good flyer. Put me on a boat, on a cruise boat, take me there. I am good. But no.
That's because you can drink on the cruise boat.
Exactly. That is a true statement. That is a very, very true statement. But you guys, our time is coming out. I always hate it. I want to
get one more thing from Richard.
We go 45 minutes. Sandy still can't
It's only
stop.
I only have 10:43.
We've got time. I was going to do closing comments, questions anyway. So, Sandy, you're first. Go on.
I want to find out, Richard, who are you looking for as guests, and how do they let you know they'd like to be a guest on your show?
Anyone that has anything to do with the publishing community at all. I've tried to get R.A. Salvatore, and he's actually been decent enough to talk to me. If you know who he is, he's a huge into the Forgotten Realms. So we'll take anyone. We have narrators, we have cover designers. They're generally indie authors, just because we're trying to support indie authors. The indie author community is so amazing. They helped me out so much when I was first starting out. Like, it's such a daunting process to do this yourself, and you need help. And the nice thing about the indie author community is they're a supportive group. They're not a competitive group. They're always there to help you. And this is my way of giving back to them.
And so I'm going to have to cut you off, because I know Russell is going to be really irritated with me for going over. But his website is Richard H. Stevens, STEPHENS.com. So go there. You can find all the information there. Great.
That's right. You can email me through my website. Absolutely.
And Richard, they can find your books on Amazon?
They can, yes. They're available on Amazon. I ship them worldwide. Canada Post is horrible. They're not as the U.S. Your media rate is so amazing. We don't have that up here.
That was my final statement, Amy, that he could find them on Amazon.
And my final statement is thank you
website.
for letting me fill in for Fern. I had fun.
Oh, you guys, I'm telling you, a special show that, Sandy's on, and that's not something that happens very often. So, Richard, you got a special show with the
I feel
OGs.
honored.
OGs of author time for sure with Sandy being on. But Richard, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your morning to come and talk to us. It has been an amazing conversation. You are welcome back anytime that you have a new book coming out. And, hey, your book launch strategy, if it's working for you, I'm an advocate for it. Because if it works, sometimes don't fix things if they're not broken, man.
I wouldn't say it's working for me. It's just that's just the way we do it. So
I think you ought to at least have a conversation with Amy.
I would definitely would. If it's making me money, then I'm definitely in. So
we all do things differently, right? And that's why
right.
all of us love the indie community and the small press and just the author and writer community in general. And that's why we do this show, is to bring you writers and authors and publishers and editors that have done things differently that maybe you've tried, or you're not alone in your struggle as a writer or publishing or to get new and creative ideas. And that's why Russell had the idea for Author Talk, and that's how this started 7 years ago. He did correct me 2 weeks ago. It was not 6, it was 7 years ago recently. So it's been a wonderful time. But Richard, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk to us. You guys, we hope that you have a fantastic Monday, a great rest of your week, and we will catch you all next week. Until then, everybody, bye for now.